What's going on, PowerUp community? This is the Coach David. We are back once again with the always amazing JD. I think this time around we're going to be chatting a little bit about supplements, what can be a very simple or a very complicated world. So with one of the experts in that, JD, go ahead and get us started, my man.
Perfect. All right. This is round 2 then. So if you missed the first round, make sure you check that on YouTube. We talked all things getting big and strong. But today we'll dive into, as David mentioned, the world of supplements is a very difficult and challenging area to navigate if you're not sure what you're looking at or what you're trying to find. If you are new to lifting or new to fitness, I would not even worry about this until you've got everything else in place. For example, having just general solid nutrition habits, sleep habits, and all that stuff. That stuff takes precedence over this. This is like the extra icing on the cake once you've got that sorted. If you are maybe further into your fitness journey and looking to, have something that's going to help potentially your performance or whatever it is, then you can kind of go down this road. But if you're looking at the main supplements for you to take to essentially improve your performance or whatever it is that is actually or backed very well by research, it's going to be your protein powder and it's going to be creatine monohydrate. If you just stick with those two, the most very basic, you're going to be good to go. Outside of that, you're starting to look at still some pretty good supplements with good research backing them, but it's not as needed as such compared to what I believe these two supplements provide. Firstly, with protein powder, so you've obviously got now millions of options because every supplement company is vying for your money. So you've got your typical whey protein, which has probably been around the longest, but then now you've got things like beef protein, vegan protein, cricket. Now you can eat bugs if you want cricket protein. So anything and everything is going to be marketed to you in that regard. But if you're looking for just tried and true, research-backed, been working for decades, your simple whey protein is fine. Obviously, you have different grades of whey protein. You got whey concentrate, whey isolate, whey hydrolysate. Now, the only reason really you're going to want to go for a more expensive isolate or hydrolysate over a concentrate is if you're lactose intolerant. So isolates are more refined. They don't have the lactose in them or as much. So you can tolerate those. If you don't have any issues with lactose and you eat dairy regularly, then your whey concentrate is fine as well. So either of those are good. Whey protein tends to spike that new muscle or the muscle building signaling much faster than other protein powders. Like generally you want to avoid things like soy protein powders because they don't provide that muscle building stimulus like whey protein does. However, if you don't drink dairy or you don't eat dairy, you just want to avoid whey protein in general. In my opinion, the next best option is a beef protein, but it's got to be high quality. Obviously, if you find a cheap beef protein, it's usually loaded with really shit collagen, which does nothing for you, even though all the new, collagen's all the rage now, but I can touch on that in a bit as well. But beef protein generally seems over the long term, if you're eating your daily protein intake, which is, I'll do it in pounds, which is anywhere from around 0.8 to 1 gram per pound of body weight per day, it doesn't seem to matter whether you're taking whey or beef protein regarding strength, size, all that stuff. So it's just an option. Obviously, if you're vegetarian or vegan, then you might go with something like a pea protein. Yeah, those are your options there. Regarding collagen, I'll jump down that rabbit hole too. You don't want to buy collagen protein for the purpose of trying to get big, strong, or for recovery after training and things like that. It doesn't have that effect. Actually, back in the day, before collagen was such a trendy product that was actually used as a protein filler within protein products. So that's where you buy really cheap protein bars and cheap protein powders. They'll just spike it with things like collagen to up the protein count, but give you nothing for you. And it was dirt cheap. But now obviously it's like a boutique product. But it has one really good application, and that is if you're suffering from tendon pain. So the typical tendinopathy, tendinitis, knee pain and things like that. Taking, I think it's around 15 to 20 grams and half an hour to an hour before you do some kind of workout. So a good example would be for tendon stuff, maybe long duration isometric, like split squats for your knee. It could be slow eccentric calf raises if you're doing for your Achilles, some jumping rope and things like that. You take that collagen, you take it with vitamin C, and that can help speed up the repair of that tendon. So that's one interesting application of collagen there, but other than that, it's pretty useless. So that's a breakdown of protein. I don't know if you have any questions you want to jump in there, David, or you want me to just carry on to creatine?
Yeah, so I know I've seen stuff before about like, how much protein can you get in a meal or in a sitting, or what do you see as the best grams per protein for like a single meal or single shake or single replacement?
Yeah, it just depends on how many meals you're going to eat a day. So that whole idea of you can only digest 20 grams of protein per day, whatever, has pretty much been debunked within the literature. I actually wrote a whole article on this. I can maybe link it in for the show notes. If you're the main important thing is you just need to hit that daily protein target each day. So that's why eating, like the whole idea of people eating 1 or 2 meals a day, it just doesn't, to me, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't work. Because if you've got to eat 180 grams of protein, you're going to eat 90 grams of protein per meal. Like, I fuck that. That's you're pretty much eating a huge steak and double scooping your protein in one meal and then having to do it again later, which is tough. For me, it's better to split it out. So then, for example, if you need to eat 180 grams of protein per day and you're eating 5 meals a day, then you're going to split that up into 35 grams of protein per meal. So that's how you can kind of figure it out that way, rather than, I have to limit myself to 20 grams for each meal, work out how many meals you're having and your total protein count, and then split it that way.
Okay, definitely. And I'm just going to kind of throw a bunch of normal gym questions at you, some gym bro questions.
Go for it.
So what about, let's say I do protein shakes, right? And so how do I go about timing, like when do I have that around my workout?
Yeah, so the old idea was the fact that there was this anabolic window. Like if you went to the gym and you didn't have a protein shake 30 minutes after, or whatever the hell it was, then essentially you'd be catabolic and all that workout was a waste of time. Since then things have changed, and the idea is that it more depends on what you eat before as well, and then timing it after. You can, if you eat a good meal before you train, say for example, an hour before you train, that's high in protein, etc., you have about 5 hours to actually get that next meal in after you train. I wouldn't advise waiting 5 hours just because you can. Again, it's going to be dependent on how your day's set out. I prefer personally to eat before and then eat directly after, just because I'm hungry. If I wait an hour, then I start to get, I don't know how you would call it, like you get that weak jittery feeling because you haven't eaten. Yeah, so I prefer to eat straight after. But it doesn't have to be protein powder. So people think like, I have to have a protein shake after the gym, right? It can be anything. Like it could be normal food, chicken, meat, other stuff is still protein. So you don't have to go down the supplement route. It's just convenient. So if you're going to the gym and you've got a half an hour to an hour ride home, or you have to go back to work, having a shake is just convenient and easy.
And that's usually my recommendation for people is, do I have to have protein powder? It's like, no, it's always best that you have real food. But like what you're saying is if you're getting your workout in your lunch break and then you're not going to have time to sit down and have a meal, then yeah, a shake can be, a really good solution to that so that you're not just dragging the rest of the day.
Yeah, exactly. Otherwise, you take a whole meal with you in a container with like rice and whatever else, then you got to find somewhere to heat it up and then
right.
drive with it.
But what I feel like I'm hearing is, as far as that anabolic window, as long as you're eating, good balanced meals throughout the day, then it's not really something to stress over.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, it all comes down. If you're hitting your daily protein target, literally you can get away with so many things.
Yeah, and that's where it started getting big, I feel like, a few years ago, and they really started talking about like the amino pool and stuff like that. And it's like you're not going to waste a workout not eating, within 45 minutes afterwards. Like your body's still making all the repairs and everything, and it's doing all the stuff. Just, for me, the biggest thing was like, I would have, what would I use? Dextrose. I would add a little bit of dextrose to my protein powders, because it wasn't so much that I was worried about, because I eat plenty of protein. It wasn't I was worried about recovering from my workout. It was more I was using up a bunch of blood glucose, a bunch of glycogen, and so it was more I just had no energy if I had to still do stuff the rest of the day.
Yeah, for sure. There's actually some good evidence as well. Pairing carbohydrates with protein is better than protein recovery-wise. Obviously, those dextrose and maltodextrin powders are great for that, just because it's essentially just sugar. So it's very fast digesting. It's easy. It goes in a shake. Again, you don't have to do it or get that stuff. It is very cheap though. But obviously you can use any other carb source you want, rice, pasta, whatever it is.
Yeah, definitely. I guess digging a little bit more to, I'm assuming you probably were going to next anyway. So go ahead and dig in a little bit more to the creatine.
Yeah, for sure. Obviously, people think creatine's a steroid, or it's going to make you lose your hair, damage your kidneys, cause muscle cramp, cause you to gain weight. I don't know if I nailed all the creatine myths there, but those are probably the most most prevalent ones. Essentially, does none of those. It's the most well-studied supplement, essentially sports supplement on the market. Yeah, I guess companies now are creating creatine, alkaline, HCl, SL, whatever the hell they are. Nothing's been shown to be as effective as just pure creatine monohydrate anyway. Creatine monohydrate is dirt cheap. That's why these supplement companies need to come up with other forms of creatine to hype them up, to add an extra $10 on the packet.
Yep.
But essentially, creatine is your ticket to getting essentially bigger, stronger, more powerful. So if you look at some of the recent meta-analyses, so if anyone's not sure what a meta-analysis study is, it's essentially compiling all the relevant randomized control trials that fit their criteria of a good study. And then they pull all those subjects and data together to make one big study. And then out of that, you can suggest certain results, and it's much stronger than just having maybe a couple of studies showing this. You're showing the totality of research points towards this thing. And you see things like 8% improvements in strength, I think 14% improvements in the number of reps you can perform at a given load, a couple of percent improvements in power output during endurance and stuff like that. So you're looking at some pretty substantial gains when taking creatine. Now, the way creatine works, we'll go into a really short basic science lesson. So within the muscles, they're going to use what's known as adenosine triphosphate, or ATP. I think most people probably heard of ATP before. And essentially, that P at the end is a phosphate molecule. Within the muscles themselves, you've got what is known as you have phosphates and you have creatine. And when they're bound together, it's known as phosphocreatine, or PCR. So you may have seen, when you look at energy systems, you see ATP, PCR is like the lactic energy system. And that's essentially referencing that phosphocreatine and the ATP there. So what happens is your muscles use this ATP for energy. And when you use ATP, you essentially lose one of those phosphates. So now you become adenosine diphosphate, or 2 phosphates. So you had 3 phosphates when you had ATP. Now you only have 2 phosphates when you have ADP. To replenish that energy, you need another phosphate. And essentially, phosphocreatine floating around the muscles becomes that new phosphate, and it replenishes ADP back to ATP. Now, obviously, the more phosphocreatine you have floating around in there, the more energy you have to quickly replenish. Obviously, you can replenish energy through other pathways. Like there's obviously the aerobic pathway. You've also got other anaerobic pathways, but they're not as fast. That's why people say, oh, the 100-meter sprinter is purely, a lactic energy system. Obviously, all energy systems work together, but it's a different topic. But essentially, all purely a lactic energy system. That's because the energy mainly supplied through that sprint, is being replenished from that ATP, PCR, or that lactic energy system. So the idea is that by taking creatine, you're increasing those PCR stores, increasing phosphate, and then you can replenish energy faster, leading to more reps in a given set, more strength, etc., etc. When you're taking it, you don't need to load it. So obviously, loading was a big thing. I'm pretty sure that was just marketed by supplement companies, I'm sure, but the previous recommendations were you load 20 grams a day for like 7 days and then do maintenance and then cycle on and off and blah, blah, blah. But you don't need to do any of that. Just 5 grams a day, or 3 to 5 grams every day. You just take it whenever. It doesn't matter when you take it. Just make it a habit and don't forget. And then you're looking at one of the myths that is kind of true is that you may gain weight, but the weight gain is only in responders to creatine. So you have responders and non-responders. Myself, I'm a non-responder. My weight doesn't change at all. I don't even notice when I take it or don't, but I just take it every day anyway. But you're looking at about like 1.1% gain in body weight, which is water weight, which is nothing anyway. And for the increase in performance, it's well worth it. And then other than that, I think I covered pretty much everything to do with, well, most things to do with creatine now. I don't know if I missed anything.
It sounds like you crushed it.
just a whole bunch of words and things, and people can just be like, okay, yeah, that must be true. Make sure you fact check me, guys.
Yeah, I'm trying to. It's funny because as I'm thinking about doing the post and doing the cut and doing whatever, I'm like, man, this is so much good information. But it's gonna give but it'll be cool because it'll give a ton of validity that you actually know what the hell you're talking about.
Yeah, well, otherwise it's gonna be mad awkward. People are like, man, this guy's no fucking clue.
Right. He's just throwing out a whole bunch of words to confuse me so that I think he knows what he's talking about.
Exactly. I'll just say ATP more often, and then it's all good.
Right. Now it's funny just as you're talking through those that from studying trainer certs and all that other stuff to see, I can visualize all the little diagrams and all the, having to test for all the energy systems and everything. It's pretty cool.
Was there any questions you want to tack on at the end of that, or do you want me to go through some other ones?
I think, so, we did I'm going to look over just kind of the notes that I have on here so far. I like the part that you had, like, if you're new to lifting, then, don't even worry about the supplement game yet.
Sure.
Figure out, sleeping well and eating first. The protein powder, the creatine. But no, it looks good for the creatine protein. So yeah, what do you want to cover next?
I can cover some maybe more on the endurance side. I'm sure there's probably people enjoy running and maybe doing some more endurance-based sports. There's a few really, really good supplements on the endurance side that aren't often talked about or marketed well. I think mainly because they're usually within pre-workout formulas, underdosed anyway. But when you buy the raw ingredients, they seem pretty powerful. So you've got the three I would say would be the top endurance ingredients, depending on the kind of endurance you're doing, would be L-citrulline or citrulline malate. There's kind of two there that are pretty much the same thing. And then you've got beta-alanine, which is the one that makes you tingle. So if anyone's taken pre-workout before and they felt like they had ants going all over their skin, that was beta-alanine. And then the last one would be sodium bicarbonate. So that would just be baking soda. So the shit you bake your cakes with. Yeah, those three would be my big three endurance supplements. Now you would use, if you were doing short form endurance, like 1 to 4 minutes of super high intensity work, like you were running 800 meters, you would use like beta-alanine, or beta-alanine is where that is most applicable. If you're doing longer endurance stuff, beta-alanine can still help, but you're looking at more like L-citrulline and sodium bicarbonate there. Because sodium bicarbonate and beta-alanine are relatively the same, so I'll cover that in a bit, but L-citrulline is slightly different. So L-citrulline is the nitric oxide booster. So everyone's probably aware of boosting nitric oxide from back in the day, No Explode, that pre-workout. But the problem with No Explode was they used L-arginine. So L-arginine was obviously touted as the NO booster of those days. The problem is L-arginine isn't well absorbed within the gut. So you take it and then it doesn't get absorbed well, and you get no nitric oxide benefit. Whereas what's that?
And you end up in the bathroom.
Yeah, then exactly. Then all that L-arginine comes out the other side. But then L-citrulline, on the other hand, is actually converted to L-arginine in the kidneys. So then you bypass the gut, and that's how you get that nitric oxide boost. For anyone wondering what nitric oxide is, essentially it just dilates your blood vessels. So essentially the streams of blood that go through your muscles, they essentially become wider. You can get more blood through there, which means you can deliver more oxygen and essentially stay aerobic longer, so you can improve your endurance there. So that's the mechanism behind L-citrulline. You can do citrulline, or you can do citrulline malate. It seems there's like a synergistic effect between L-citrulline and malate. That's why they put them together, so either or's all good. You're looking at taking around 6 to 8 grams per day, every day on that one, but it also has an acute benefit, so you can literally take it just before you work out too. So that's something interesting there. When you're looking at beta-alanine and sodium bicarbonate is never talked about, but I think it's just because you literally buy it at the supermarket and no supplement company can sell it. Because I mean, it'll kind of look weird having a supplement company selling you baking products. But
they'll figure it out.
It has yeah, and it's dirt cheap too. Essentially, they have the same mechanism, just done different ways. So the mechanism behind these is essentially creating sodium bicarbonate creates a more alkaline environment. So if anyone remembers their chemistry back in the day with the pH scale, you've got obviously acidic under 7, you've got basic or alkaline over 7. Whereas beta-alanine tries to keep things, I guess, more neutral or longer. What beta-alanine does, it essentially creates more carnosine within the body. and that starts to buffer what are known as hydrogen ions. So I think I covered some of this part in the previous chat we did, but just briefly, when we exercise, if you're exercising at low intensity, you can go for a very, very long time because you're mainly aerobic. You got lactate at a pretty steady state at a low level. Now, lactate's not the problem. The problem is the associated rise of hydrogen ions. And these hydrogen ions actually acidify the environment within the muscle. And when you acidify the environment, it actually reduces the muscle's ability to contract. And then obviously you can't produce as much force, and that's where fatigue starts to kick in. So when you take beta-alanine, this can increase levels of carnosine as your blood lactate rises, and then the subsequent increase in hydrogen ions rise. It helps to essentially remove those hydrogen ions. So it keeps you at a lower blood lactate level for longer, and then obviously you can sustain higher intensity exercise for longer there. Sodium bicarbonate doesn't buffer the hydrogen ions. Instead, it just creates a more alkaline environment to start with. So you got more room to move before you actually get into that acidic environment. So both are similar mechanisms there regarding that. Beta-alanine you're looking to take, I think it's around 1.8 to 2 grams, around 2 grams. And you can take that before your workout, or you can take that throughout the day. It depends. Obviously, it's going to give you that tingly feeling. And that tingly feeling, there's no harmful side effect from it. It just happens. It doesn't get any better the longer you take it, so you can't get used to it. It just happens all the time. And then essentially, you're just taking that before you work out, and most days. And that's going to help you extend your endurance. With sodium bicarbonate, you're looking at 0.2 to 0.4 grams per kg of body weight, an hour or 2 hours before training. So, but obviously that's a lot. Because if you're like a 70 kg individual, what's that, like 145 pounds-ish, you're looking at like 14 to 28 grams of sodium bicarb, which is a shit ton to have to ingest. So what you can do is you can split it throughout the day. So if you do say you take 21 grams, you'll just take 7 grams in different intervals throughout the day until you train. And that one you don't have to take every day. That one you just take when you train. So that's a nice one you can do that's quite cheap. Obviously, you just need to be wary of how your stomach reacts to that. So don't just do it on race day, do it on training so you can get an idea of how you feel. I don't know, do you have any questions on those? And I can just cover maybe 1 or 2 more.
No, those were solid.
Maybe I'll cover just caffeine quickly as well, because obviously if you're looking for a well-known, very good performance enhancer, caffeine is your go-to. Obviously, you've all felt the effects of it. One thing you can do, though, which I've found works really well, even performance-wise, is to pair it with L-theanine. So L-theanine and caffeine together is like, I don't know if it's the original nootropic, but it's probably the most mainstream nootropic. So if you've been part of that world and you understand nootropics, essentially they could call them brain drugs, smart drugs, cognitive enhancers, whatever other term they want to give there, but essentially it's like enhancing your mental performance. So L-theanine and caffeine have this synergistic effect. So essentially you can improve your physical performance, but you can also improve your mental performance with sharpness, alertness, focus, all that stuff too. The major benefit is actually, if you get jittery from caffeine, taking L-theanine actually takes that away. So you don't get that yuck, anxiety feeling if you have too much. Generally, you want to take a 2-to-1 ratio. So, for example, you're going to take 200 milligrams of L-theanine, you'll take 100 milligrams of caffeine. But what I've found is most companies now sell really high dose L-theanine because they sell it for like mood support and relaxation and stuff. So I've been playing around with like 400 milligram L-theanine with like 100 milligram caffeine, and that's still been all good. But for me, I'm quite sensitive to caffeine. So it's important to know that there are also different levels of responders for caffeine. So there's actually some good research showing that some athletes, when taking caffeine, actually see a reduction in performance compared to those who are high responders to caffeine, essentially see that big improvement in performance. And it seems to come down to a gene that you have. So just be aware how you feel when taking caffeine exercising. Obviously, if you take caffeine exercise and you feel like it's not good, you don't feel great, obviously just scale back on it. You don't have to take it. It's just something that can help if you respond well.
I think that is a really good point. Because when I was talking with Bodyweight yesterday, we were talking about a kind of like a medical condition he had where it was like, I forget the name of it, but it was like acid reflux times 1,000,000. And he was on prescription drugs and stuff for it. and eventually just kind of like tested through a diet, did like an elimination diet, tested through all the different things. And then, they told him he was going to have to take these pills a couple times a day for the rest of his life, and hasn't taken them in years.
Oh, wow.
But same thing here is like caffeine is the global drug.
Oh, yeah.
And so everybody checks the box like, hey, I'm supposed to have caffeine. Hey, I'm getting ready to work out. I need to have a pre-workout, which, standard bro pre-workout means shit ton of caffeine all at one time.
Yeah.
Right? Whereas, like, what you're saying is if we start looking at some of these separate things and putting some of these separate things together, a pre-workout doesn't have to be caffeine. It just has to be something that's going to reinforce and help your workout. So I think it's important for people to test out different amounts, and be okay saying caffeine's not for me for a workout.
Yeah, for sure. And also take into account, so the recommendation for acute strength and power improvements is 3 to 6 milligrams per kg of body weight. Now, if I took even 3 milligrams per kg of body weight, I would be out the door running through fucking windows and doors and whatever else. There's no way in hell I could handle taking that much caffeine and be sane. I see performance improvements on caffeine, even just low dose, even 50 milligrams for me, just because I'm that sensitive to it. So obviously trial and error there. Secondly, what's interesting is the research around taurine as well. So you can actually get away with lower doses of caffeine if you have higher doses of taurine. So most energy drinks have taurine in them. There's not many pre-workouts that have taurine in them for some reason. I don't know why. But essentially, the higher dose of taurine, you're looking at 1 to 3 grams. Some are a little lower. Obviously, the higher dose of taurine, the better the performance seen, even at lower doses of caffeine. So that's an interesting one to think of too, or to take into account. So you don't even have to take this stuff before training. I never used to back in the day, and sometimes we'll have a very small energy drink before training, but other than that, you don't need to have it. But that's just something to keep in mind. If you are sensitive to caffeine, you can actually up the taurine dose.
Yeah, I kind of go through phases of taking having a pre-workout before every workout, and then just having nothing.
Sometimes it's just the taste and the flavor that gets you on it.
yeah, and majority of the time, it's just that tingle or that itch.
Yeah, there could be
absolutely nothing in it. If there's beta-alanine, you're just like, yes.
Yeah, it's funny. Pre-workouts, that's how most people gauge them as working, And the 2 ingredients that most pre-workouts dose heavily is beta-alanine and niacin. So obviously, there's a helicopter going past here. There's a thing called the niacin flush. So that gives you that red skin and that similar feeling. So they'll load the shit out of those. Plus, they'll boatload it with caffeine. Some with 200 to 300 milligrams, which is crazy. And then underdose everything else.
Yeah, and then you're just straight hyped. Best pre-workout ever.
Yeah, exactly. Well, some of them even had methamphetamine derivatives and stuff in them, back in the day. So you could literally just train on meth.
Yeah.
No wonder you had good workouts.
Yeah, with no actual cellular level improvement in results.
Exactly. So that's just something to be aware of. If anyone's looking at pre-workouts, you don't need them. But 2, if you're looking for a pre-workout, you need to read the ingredients label and make sure they're dosed properly. 99% of them are underdosed, because 1, you can't fit everything you want in there depending on the ingredients you use. Because when you're formulating supplements, they go through this thing where you have to go by granule size and stuff like that. So you need to you have to have certain proportions of ingredients, because if you have certain ingredients, the big granules or the heavy ones sink to the bottom, and then basically the pre-workout separates in the bottle. So they have these weird formulas and whatever else they do. But either way, I generally recommend, if you're going to get a pre-workout, find something that's lower dose in caffeine, that doesn't have many ingredients unless you're looking for certain ones. Avoid ones with creatine in them, because you don't need creatine in a pre-workout, because you need to take creatine every day anyway, and it's so cheap by itself. Do that instead, because if you have creatine in a pre-workout, I mean something else had to be taken out or dosed less, essentially. The most common ingredients now are probably the ones that I mentioned already. The L-citrulline is very common now within pre-workouts, but it's very rarely dosed appropriately. You need, as I mentioned, 6 to 8 grams. Most of them are dosed at 3. beta-alanine's obviously always in there because that's that thing that gives you that tingle. And then sometimes you're looking at other, I guess you could say, pump ingredients like betaine anhydrous and some other bits and pieces. But yeah, other than that, it's not necessary to have. You can get away with something that's just, I mean, coffee is essentially a pre-workout.
Yeah, and that's so often that I've seen, like, the basic pre-workout recommendation is 1 cup of coffee or coming in around 80 to 100 milligrams caffeine.
Yeah.
Like
yeah,
coffee,
exactly.
Go, work out.
Yeah, exactly. And that's usually more than enough if you like coffee. But now another quick one to touch on is the idea of mass gainers. Obviously, people love the idea. I guess beginners mainly love to get on. Want to get big. The first thing they gravitate to is a mass gainer. Again, you got to be very careful because you can get those massive bags of mass gainers, and it's like 5 servings, and it's like a 5-kilo bag, and it's like you don't need to. The serving size they recommend you don't need to take. I mean, most of them are like, I think the Optimum Nutrition one, the serving size is like 1,600 calories or some shit like that. It's like 5 scoops of their thing. Again, you're not going to eat what you normally eat, and suddenly add 1,600 calories a day. That's insane. You can literally, if you look at the ingredients label, you can work out you only need a few hundred calories per day extra if you're going to use a mass gainer. So the other thing to look for is, depending on when you're going to take it, sometimes you might not want just a pure one that's just maltodextrin and protein. So like the number one ingredient is always like cheap carb filler, which is all good if you're like really looking to gain weight. But there's other ones out there that have things like sweet potato powder and oat powder and stuff, which you can do. But it's much easier just to make your own. Obviously, if you make your own, you can make your own smoothie and you can fill it with things like oats, full fat milk. Yeah, I mean, there's so much stuff you can put in these things to boost the calories. You can use full fat cream if you wanted to add some extra fat in there. Yeah, there's a lot of ways to go. Obviously, increasing your fat intake's one of the easiest ways, just because obviously it's more calorie dense, easier to get more calories in. Obviously, if you have too much fat, you're going to be full for ages. So there's a balance there to be had. But you can create your own mass gainers at home, just through using your protein powder and a bunch of ingredients in a blender, and you're good to go.
Yeah, I definitely like that idea because, like you're saying, most of the mass gaining powders are just a bunch of carb filler. I've seen a lot of times they'll have like a lot of extra like cholesterol. Like just a bunch of just random crap to where, like you're saying, like I've seen 700-800 calorie mass gainer.
Yeah, it's crazy, eh? And you go, man, like, dude, you just must get so fat taking that stuff for like a month.
I've never been able to, like, I don't know, I've never been able to bulk successfully. I just get fat. So I kind of just, and then they came up with the new term, lean bulk.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I'm pretty sure that's just slowly gaining positive weight over time. Just kind of like skipping breakfast became cool and they called it intermittent fasting.
Everything goes around in circles, eh? It's so funny. They just want to put buzzwords on everything.
Yeah. I mean, it's it's like what you're saying with coming up with new types of creatine. Like, hey, you can get creatine everywhere. You can get a whole bottle for like $10. We're not going to make any money on this, so let's rename it and add something else and say that it's better. Charge twice as much. Yeah,
for sure, exactly. And there's one more supplement I'll touch on before we finish, and that is BCAAs, or branched chain amino acids. And obviously, I think everything's just honestly just growing in popularity just from supplement company marketing. I mean, these guys have so much damn money, they can just market anything. But you don't need them. BCAAs are actually in pretty much every protein source, so you're eating them. If you're having a whey protein powder, you're getting BCAAs in there. And no, you don't need to sip on BCAAs during your training session, none of that. So all the research now is showing no additional benefit to when you have BCAAs when you eat your total daily protein intake. So again, as we mentioned at the start of this chat, you can get away with so much more if you're hitting your daily protein targets. And one of them is you don't need BCAAs. The second thing is with BCAAs as well. It's quite interesting. You need all 9 essential amino acids to actually build muscle. So interesting, BCAAs is only 3 of them. So the whole idea was BCAAs was the leucine spiking hypothesis, right? It was like leucine is that one amino acid that spikes muscle protein synthesis. It's that one thing that's so important, so we're going to make BCAAs. But the only problem is, in order for you to stimulate the building of new proteins, you need all 9 EAAs. And when you're taking BCAAs, you're only getting 3 of them. So for the body to get the other 6 amino acids, they need to break down proteins that already exist within the body in order to fulfill that requirement. So it's just something to think about there too. But yeah, essentially BCAAs are an expensive water flavor. I mean, that's what my wife uses to flavor her water. So yeah, I mean, it tastes nice, but that's about it.
It's funny and it's so sad, man, because I spent not any time recently because I'm like, I don't know, maybe because I'm older and I don't care about spending money on a whole bunch of different things that might get me an extra rep. But,
Yeah.
you know, like in my 20s, I never missed my BCAAs.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
Oh, in your 20s, when you first start lifting, it's all around the people, you know, what you're going to have before the workout, what you're going to have in the workout, what you're going to have after the workout.
Yes, I would have, a lot of times I would actually drink my protein shake during, because for whatever reason, I drink a lot while I'm working out. So I would have, you know, what was it? Man, like bodybuilding.com came out with those shakers where you could like screw the bottoms on and off.
Yeah.
And so you'd have like the protein in the bottle itself because it was too big to like fit in the bottom. And then you'd have the BCAAs. And then I'd have like the dextrose. And I had like, bro, I had it set up. Little did I know that I had enough like free testosterone that all I had to do was lift things and eat.
and then ignore the 12 beers that night as well.
Well, yeah.
That's not part of the plan.
That was my carb loading.
But on actually, something depending on what kind of training you're doing and how long you're training, having stuff during the workouts can be a good idea. Obviously, it just depends. Like if you're training more than an hour intensely, so if you're in there just doing bodybuilding stuff, you probably don't need to. But if you're doing like hard endurance or hard interval training, whatever it is, or even just hard sports training, having some carbohydrate to sip on, like your Gatorade and stuff like that, it's worth doing. Yeah, but it's not essential. It's just something that can help you if you're doing longer sessions. But yeah, as you were mentioning, if you're just in the gym doing chest for an hour or 90 minutes, you don't need to come in and start having your BCAAs and protein and dextrose all in there ready to go.
Yeah, man, I had all the timing down perfect. Good stuff.
Oh,
good stuff. And yeah, definitely, like, you know, I've seen that before as well as, you know, over an hour, you need to start trying to replace, otherwise you get behind on the glucose and glycogen and all that.
Yeah, for sure. I can help you feel the rest of the workout, so that's just something that you can do too.
Kind of like I'd mentioned before, I noticed it the most post-workout, is if, like, from my workout, so I had to go from the gym back to life, where I was, like, running errands or doing a bunch. I wasn't, like, going to sit down to have a meal. Having that protein and that carb replacement made it to where, like, my energy kind of came right back, and then I could go about my day versus just having the protein powder, and then I'm still kind of dragging, you know, low blood sugar after that.
Oh, definitely. I mean, most people are scared of carbs now, aren't they? Because they went from fat to carbs.
Yep.
Now it's going to, what's it at now? I think carbs are still the devil, but
I think we're kind of getting against meat.
So now it's protein.
Yep.
So next will be fat. It'll be fat again.
It'll be fat again. After that. Yeah. Or it'll just be everything.
It'll just be everything. You have to drink your BCAAs. What was that company? That Soylent, that meal replacement thing that years, I can't remember how long ago it was now. They had this like liquid paste that you would have that would replace all your dietary needs. Gotcha. And you just drink a disgusting paste or something each day.
So, yeah, it's like astronaut stuff.
Yeah, exactly. That's what it will get to.
Oh, man, that's perfect. You know what's great too? Oh, man, that's going to be so easy to market. Like, man. You're like your stomach doesn't even have to digest this, and it's a direct boost of nutrients, and the calorie content versus nutrient is a quarter of a normal meal, and you'll lose weight so fast. Oh man, we can go make millions on that right now.
That's the new PowerUp product.
That's the new PowerUp product. PowerUp paste.
There we go, guys. That's alpha.
Yep. Oh man. Okay, so we've hit a lot of the gym stuff. I have a quick question.
Yep.
That I see come up every so often. How do you feel about multivitamin?
I'm indifferent. I mean, take it if you want. If you don't want to, I mean, I don't take a multivitamin. The only thing to be worried about, like the reason I don't take a multivitamin is mainly so I I don't have hemochromatosis I got tested for. So hemochromatosis is storing a lot of iron in your blood, but I had really high iron at one point, and I had hemochromatosis tends to run in the family. So most multivitamins have iron. Obviously, they have everything in them. So that's one reason I avoided it. I mean, if you need to take it, take it. I don't think it makes that much difference.
Yeah, and that's usually what I've seen is most of them are garbage.
Yeah, oh yeah. It's underdosed everything, right? And then obviously the problem is like certain vitamins and minerals. I know, what do you call it? Some are synergistic, but some counteract each other. So you're essentially just like blocking the absorption of some. So it was like iron and is it vitamin C and iron? Or was that synergistic? Well, I can't remember what it is now, but
I think it was calcium.
There's a reason you don't drink tea before you have red meat. I think that's what I learned back in the day. Because it stops the absorption of iron. So obviously within multivitamins, you can have things that are going to reduce the absorption of certain things.
Yeah, that was one of the big first factors I saw in starting to figure out the marketing side of supplements. Like, obviously, I think there's a few of them, but I think the big one was at a certain dose of calcium, then there was an issue with having iron in the same supplement. And then,
that must have been.
And then that was probably one as well. Like you're saying, probably maybe like with the tea, maybe it was like something with like the tannins or something.
Yeah, I'm not too sure.
But that's all it is you take like your men's daily vitamin, you flip to the back of it, and it's like, okay, this has 20 things at 100%. This other one has 10 things at 100%. I'll take the 20.
Yeah.
With a lot of things, like, if you're taking a B vitamin or something, then that's usually what I recommend is you can try some things out. Obviously, best answer is to get your blood work done and see if you actually need anything. Yeah, but you can try different things out because, like, if you just go ahead and start popping vitamin B pills, you'll be all right. Worst case is you'll get a little bit of energy and you'll pee the rest of it out. But if you start messing with, vitamins that have like fat soluble stuff, and you're already at a good level or high, then you can actually kind of screw yourself up.
Yeah, for sure. And I think in the States as well, it's quite easy to get your blood tested.
Oh, yeah.
Just go to a clinic. But places like in New Zealand here, it can be quite difficult because you have to go through a GP, you pay for that, etc., etc. But still worth doing, just so you get an idea, so you're not just blindly taking things.
Yeah, well, and that's the other thing is, like, if it's a situation where it's hard to get your blood tested, for the most part, you don't really need a multivitamin.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's kind of where I've been is kind of what you're saying is like indifferent, just another method of expensive pee.
Yeah.
Get your multivitamin and your BCAAs.
Yep.
And they do, man. The BCAAs come up with the best flavors.
Man, that's probably because it's the easiest one to flavor. Because obviously with pre-workouts, I think caffeine makes things bitter. So with BCAAs, you can go to town with your purple grape flavors and mango things and whatever else.
See, I like my pre-workout to kind of punch me in the mouth though. It kind of gets the whole thing started.
It becomes a routine, right? Like when you have that certain drink or that flavor, that's like a routine that kind of kicks you into gear to train. So that's sometimes why it can become almost like a routine habit for your training. And sometimes sometimes it's not the pre-workout that's doing the thing. It's just the fact that you're getting into that routine and getting mentally ready.
Exactly. Well, very cool, man. This is a ton of very valuable information. If you're just getting started, don't worry about the supplements. Once you've kind of figured some things out and you're getting on the right track and you're ready to kind of level up a little bit, go into the protein powders and the creatine. If you decide to go even more, you can get into, pairing some of these couple individual things together, especially we were talking about like endurance, high performance type stuff, benefits of caffeine, but being careful with pre-workouts because it's mostly makes you feel hyped and doesn't have the levels of things that are actually going to be beneficial to your results. BCAAs taste good, and that's about it. And then a good guide on kind of making your own mass gainer, because the mass gaining powders are usually just a bunch of fillers and excess calories and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So with those that you've covered already exceptionally, is there anything you want to finish off with?
No, we covered heaps. So I just hope some good information for the listeners and they can take some action on it. And if anyone does listen to this again, just throw, if you have questions, just throw them in the chat or even in my chat on the PowerUp Discord in there, anywhere, and I can answer them too.
Yeah, look for JD's channel. JD's got a new fitness channel. We're gonna call it his because he's the performance guy. So look for the performance channel under fitness, or just wherever you get stuck floating around, just hit at JD. I know he'll be quick to jump in there and help you out. Thanks so much, my man. I really appreciate your time and your wealth of knowledge. Hey, I appreciate you.
Cheers. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. So like JD said, if you're listening to this after, listening to the recording, jump into the Discord, search them out, tag any of the trainers, get involved. Really, we're all just here to kind of help you get to your goals and have a good time doing it. We'll catch you on the next PowerUp podcast. Have a great day, and we'll see you guys later.